Welcome to the Aro Benaiah Show, where we highlight the stories and insights of hands-on entrepreneurs, builders, and leaders shaping the future of work. Today, I'm joined by Scott Morris, a former chief people officer turned tech entrepreneurs and the founder of Propulsion AI, with over 2 decades of HR leadership across industries and continents. Scott now helps companies design smarter rules, make better hiring decisions, and improve employment engagement in a world transformed by AI. It's really a pleasure having you on the show, Scott.
I'm thankful to be invited, Aro. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. So, Scott, what was it like growing up?
What was it like growing up?
Yeah.
I grew up both in the United States, and then my family, when I was young, moved to Brazil. And so I spent early part of my childhood growing up in Sao Paulo, Brazil, and then in the United States as well. And I'm not sure what else is interesting about me, but I think the experience living outside the country gave me something that a lot of people that look like me don't get. We don't get the opportunity in the United States when you look, like the majority, you don't get the experiences sometimes that other people get. And when I went to Brazil, I wasn't in the majority. I was the one who was different. And and I didn't speak the language very well. And when I did speak the language, I spoke with an accent. And I remember what that experience was like. And I think it's formative for a lot of the things that happened in my life. It's one that makes you aware of other perspectives. And I hope in my case has made me want to reach out and embrace perspectives that aren't my own.
Wow. Amazing, amazing. Thanks for sharing that. So, what was your first ever job and what did it teach you about work, responsibility, and dealing with people?
My first job, my
Yeah.
first real job, I was a magician. I did magic. I think I was 13 years old. Ran my own business as a 13-year-old, performing and at parties and making people, I don't know, impressed with magic. And it was a decent way for a 13-year-old kid to make some money and have a good
Yeah.
time and learn what it was like to be in front of other people. But I mean, you learn at an early age about the customer and, trying to figure out what it is that the customer is going to be happy with and what's going to create a wow, experience for them.
Yeah.
And I did that in that case in a performance sense. And it wasn't a go to work every day kind of job, but that was the first time
Yeah.
that I've gotten paid.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. So, before HR and tech, what different roles did you try along the way that influenced your leadership, your leaders you actually become today?
Well, so I started when my first job as an adult after I graduated from college was as a police officer, and I lived in California in the United States, and yeah, and I was a police officer, wore a uniform, drove a car, and was in law enforcement. And I think the one thing that I learned in that job that I think carries into the other professional work that I've done is that you could have four people standing on the four corners of an intersection and watching the same accident, and they have four very different perspectives about what happened. And
Mm.
work is an awful lot like that, right? Work isn't just coming in and doing tasks. The experience and the outputs in some cases are shaped by perspective. And that was one thing that I learned in that job as a police officer that I find very applicable, not only in the work that I do today, but I think the work that I've done across my career. I'm a three-time entrepreneur. This is my third entrepreneurial venture. The first was a professional services training company. We trained people to use computer software. This was back in the very early days of when computers and computer software were getting put on people's desks. I hate to sort of date myself and show how old I am, but it goes way back to the mid 1990s when companies were paying to help their employees learn to use computer software. And that was my first entrepreneurial venture. My second was
Wow.
a professional services, a consulting firm that I ran with three partners. We had 13 associates, and we focused primarily on public sector strategy development. And we also did HR and IT transformation work. particularly in the public sector. And then Propulsion AI is my third entrepreneurial venture. And I know we'll get a chance to talk about that later, but it's probably
Yeah.
been the best of all of the experiences.
Wow, amazing, amazing. So, what moment did you realize that you wanted something more, and you actually more like left your corporate HR to becoming a tech founder? What moment did you realize that?
Well, so I've been in the profession of HR for 25 years. And 20 of those years were in C-level roles and really large organizations, like 15,000 employees, and really small, like 150 employees. Across all of that time, I had dispensed advice to managers. I've coached managers, hundreds of managers, about a wide variety of subjects, and I've coached a lot of employees too. And one thing that I've tried to share with others is the importance of finding fit with not just the work that you do, but with your employer. And I tell that part of the story, Aro, because after 25 years, I found myself in a job where I didn't fit. And what I mean by that, I don't mean fit in, because I've never felt like I fit in, and I don't want anybody else to have to feel like they fit in. But there's a real difference when you go to work and you don't have to pick your words, and nobody has to pick them with you. And even on hard days, it doesn't feel like the world is coming to an end. It just feels like, it's just a hard day. And even when you have hard problems, you don't hate your job. You just recognize it's a hard problem. Those are hallmarks of fit at work. And I found myself in a situation where I didn't fit. And so I took a job, and I took the job for the wrong reasons. Even after years of giving advice to other people about being sure they take jobs for the right reasons, I took the
Mm,
job for the wrong reason. I took it because of the money. I took it because of the location. And what I found was I got in and everything was great for the first couple of months. And then all of a sudden, I started to recognize all of the signs that I just didn't fit. And by the time I got to the end of my first year, honestly, I think they hated me and I hated them first ever. And so I went to my boss and I said, "This is not working out." And he said, "Great, because it's not working out for me either." And we parted. I can joke about it now, but I will tell you honestly that that experience it hurt. It hurt every part of me. I felt like a failure. I felt like I had done something wrong. I felt like I was unable to contribute. And the problem, that lack of fit at work, it's about a $1.9 trillion problem in the United States and 9.9 trillion globally. The cost, like some of the costs are very easy to calculate. We know that fully disengaged people at work tend to produce only about 60% of what you pay them, which means if you have 100 people in a company and you've got disengaged people, you have as many as 40 people in your organization who are getting paid and they're not doing much. And so those costs are easy to calculate. The Society for Human Resource Management says that when a position turns over, it's going to cost you about 200% of that person's salary to refill that position. Those costs are easy. But the hard costs are the personal costs. Feeling like you're a fraud, the feeling that you are unable to contribute, right? All of those things.
yeah,
And none of those things were true. I'm good at my job and I was good in that job. It just was a bad fit. So that concept, more than anything, and that experience more than anything, is what said to me, I want to figure out a way to make that better. Because there are tens of millions of people who go to work and they're in that same situation. They just don't fit. And it's worse sometimes when you stay than when you go. But the experience people
yeah,
should have, right? Gallup tells us, their latest survey, by the way, said that less than half of workers feel that they understand the expectations that their boss has for them. Think about that. The number's 47% who either agree or strongly agree with the statement, I understand what's expected of me at work. Less than half. That's really troubling. And there was an article published in Fortune magazine. The authors followed 20,000 new hires. 49% of them failed in the first 18 months. That's half. That's a lot, right? So I became really committed to this idea that if we really come in and bring technology to bear and help managers be more clear about roles, drive, engage, build roles that have meaning and purpose in them, they're going to get better performance, and people are going to feel better about going to work every day. And that's why we started the company, and that's what we're trying to build around.
Wow, amazing. Thanks for actually sharing this. And I think it's really a whole lot when it comes to that. And this speak volumes. So, and I think just the way you make reference of it, when a particular employee does not feel that they understood their role, staying there for long sometimes, it really did a whole lot it did a whole lot of evil to them compared to think would be that they lost their self-confidence. They will hate themselves. They are going to kind of, and at the end of the day, despite they are not producing the result that has been demanded in the business, still personally, they are being disadvantaged, being that they lost trust on themselves, they lost ability in themselves, they lost a whole lot of things by just staying there. And it's really a painful experience both for them and even the employees.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it shows up in so many different places, right? There are physical and mental health impacts to the person, and there's business consequences. IDC says that they are a business research firm, and they've estimated that mid-market companies lose 20 to 30% of their revenue because of misaligned and underperforming employees. Think about that. If you have $100 million company, if you have $100 million in revenue, 20% of that is $20 million. That's $20 million that's walking out the door because of underperforming and misaligned employees. That's a big number.
Yeah, it is actually. So you have seen thousands of employees and job applicants. What does a good hire look like beyond just skills on CV?
Well, so you can't ask that question until you ask a question, and I want to answer that question for you because you've asked it. But you have to ask a different question first, which is, what's the design of the role? And so many times we go into hiring and we haven't really thought through the role. I want to give you an example because we're very task focused. Most of us as managers, we're very, very focused on tasks, but tasks are not engaging and they don't have meaning and purpose to them. And sometimes they're really hard to do. And they don't open the door to innovation or to initiative or to ownership, right? So you have to start with a different question, which is, why am I hiring this role to begin with? What do I need? Let me give you an example. So let's say we were talking about an accountant. An accountant, in a job description for an accountant, you would usually see something like follow up on delinquent accounts. And you have to ask yourself, why is that in there? Right? Do we need to see somebody sit at a desk all day and make phone calls and write emails and do that kind of laborious stuff? Is that what we need? We need more phone calls made? Following up on delinquent accounts is a means to an end. That's what we have to start training ourselves to focus on, right? What is the end? Why do I need somebody to focus on following up on delinquent accounts? And in most cases, it's because we're trying to reduce what's called days sales outstanding, or DSO for short, right? That is a measure. It's usually used by the finance team, and it indicates how quickly we can collect money that we're owed in the company, right? If we have a company that is $10 million ARR, annual recurring revenue, and we move DSO from 90 days to 60 days, we create $833,000 worth of value. So why do we tell that accountant, your job is to follow up on delinquent accounts? Why don't we tell them that the outcome is their job? Your job is to bring down DSO. It's currently at 90. We need it to be at 60. We need to keep it as low as we can keep it. That's your job. Why don't we do that? Because that has an impact to the business. $33,000 worth of value if you do that part of your job well. That creates meaning and purpose, and that's what employees are really looking for. They want to know that their work matters. You know what managers are looking for? They're looking for initiative. They're looking for ownership. They're looking for accountability. And the way that you get those three things is you focus on the outcome. Because now, if I tell you, hey, your job is to sit there and make phone calls, then you know what you do? You sit there and you make phone calls. And I have very few ways of measuring the impact of that. But if I tell you, Aro, your job is to bring down days sales outstanding. It's at 90. I need it to be at 60. Then what you do is you come back to me and you say, hey, Scott, if that's my job, shouldn't I do these things too? And I said, yes, do those things, right? I'm not on the front line. I didn't even see that. I didn't even know that was there. But yes, do those things, right? Focusing on the outcome opens the door to initiative on your part and to ownership on your part. And so now, rather than just being an employee, you're a part of something meaningful. And all I had to do to get there was shift my focus from tasks to outcomes. So, what does a good hire look like? You first have to ask yourself, what does a well-designed role look like? And a well-designed role should help the manager answer these questions. How does this role fit into strategy? What are the outcomes that I need? Not the tasks, but the outcomes. Why is that box on the org chart? How am I going to measure success? In other words, can I define good in this role? And then what are the competencies and skills that the individual needs? Now, what that effectively does, if I can answer those questions, I now have a blueprint for the role. And when a top tier person, a top tier candidate comes and says, hey, I'd like to talk to you about that role, I can talk to them not just about what needs to be done, but why it matters. So what that's going to do is attract a different caliber of talent, because that top tier talent, they understand, right? People are smart. And if I come to interview with you and you haven't thought through the role and you don't know what its purpose is and you don't know how you're going to measure success, what I'm as a top tier talent, what I should be saying is, do I really want to work for him? So what does a good hire look like? It's somebody that fits your blueprint and somebody who's ready to take on the tough work of moving the numbers the way you need them to be moved. But to find that person, you got to have the blueprint to begin with.
Wow, this is really, really amazing. I think they just speak volumes to, apart from just saying tasks, we should start thinking about what is the outcome we are looking at here. When it comes to the measurable, why is that task be important at the end of the day, and how does those tasks fit into the big scale of things, and or what is more like the metric we can actually measure, say, okay, this is success when it comes to this particular role. And I think the way you just make it measure, you just speak volumes to most times a whole lot of employees, they don't understand what their role is when it comes to the ground of things. They just know that they are just doing a repetitive task, but not knowing how it fits into the bigger pictures. So explaining it more like in terms of how their role gets to kind of feel into the big pictures and what the total outcome is. It's a better way to get the job done, so that at the end of the day, they can take initiative, put in a lot of creativity towards ensuring the results. And in fact, maybe even past another route, executing the task. But at the end of the day, we get our results, what we are looking at.
Right. When I coach managers, I ask them, they say, we need to hire a role, whatever the role is, right? And I'll say, in a year, after you hire that person, in a year, what's different? How do you know that that role did something good? And if the manager can't answer that question, we're not ready to hire, because we're about to go out and spend a bunch of money. 200, we're replacing, if you go back to that statistic that I gave you earlier, 200%. So if I've got a position that's paid $50,000 a year, it's going to cost me $100,000 to fill that role. If I'm not really thinking through the role, am I ready to spend that money? This is why we created Propulsion AI, because the big problem is most managers don't think in those terms naturally. They can think in those terms, but they don't do it naturally. And you know what? Most HR people can't help them. They're just not equipped. They don't have the business acumen. They don't have the consulting skills necessary to do it. So what we did is we created, and what we're in the process of doing is really creating an HR team with just artificial intelligence. Our first teammate is named Athena, and she focuses on role design. She works directly with managers, and we built her to think and process the same way or in a similar way to how her human counterparts operate. So she will engage the manager. Let's say that you have a role that you're going to pivot. You're going to do something different with it. You've already got a person in it. You're going to pivot. You're going to change the job. Or let's say that you're hiring from the outside. Athena, you and Athena are going to sit down and have a conversation about that role. And Athena's going to ask you questions. You're going to give her answers. She's going to put different answers together, reason about them, give you some content, take your feedback about it, rework the content, and move on. And she's going to walk you through a very defined framework for thinking about this job. And at the end of that conversation, which, by the way, Aro, can be as little as 15 minutes, she has helped you to become clear about what you want. She's also done all of the writing for you, a performance-based job description with key performance indicators in it, turned into first-year measurable results. She's written a posting for the web. She's written a recruiter spec for sourcing to give to your HR team. She's written an interviewer guide.
Wow.
She can do compensation analysis on base salary to make sure that you're equitable for the area that you are going to be hiring that role into. And she can get all of that done in as little as 15 minutes. Now, we also, by the way, gave her a different capability, which is she can not only help you with roles going forward, but she can help you with the ones you already have. She can read and analyze 100% of your existing job descriptions, rewrite them so that they shift from task focused to outcomes focused, and then coach the
Mm.
manager around editing them. And she can do
Wow,
that when
this
and
is a lot.
where you're ready for her to do it.
How did you get inspired to actually build Propulsion AI? Because it's really amazing just hearing what it can do and a whole lot of things that could actually change when it comes to it.
Well, when I watch you, as I describe what Athena does, I can watch you get excited about it. And that's really the reason that we built her, was because I think managers want to be great managers, and sometimes they just don't know how. And it's honestly, I don't want to oversimplify it. I don't want to say being a great manager is easy, because it's not. It's a hard job. But there are some things that make it a lot easier. And when you think about it, the role clarity that Athena builds is not just important for hiring, but it's important for performance management. If you're my boss and we sit down on a weekly basis to talk about the work that I'm doing, what kind of conversation should we have? Right? A part of it should be, how are you doing? A part of it should be us interacting and having a relationship that is a strong relationship, right? But in part, you also want to ask me some tough questions. How are you doing to the numbers? We agreed you were going to produce certain results. How are you doing? How are you doing on that path? Are you on track? Are you off track? Right? How are you showing up at work? Right? We agreed certain competencies were important. Maybe I do a great job with problem solving, but I don't do a very good job with adaptability. As my boss, you should be helping me. You should be coaching me to become more adaptable. Well, we can't talk about results if we haven't agreed what those results are. And we can't talk about how I'm showing up if we haven't defined the competencies. And we can't talk about my growth if we haven't defined which skills are important. These are all things that Athena helps the manager to get their head around. And so, not just in hiring, but in performance management, this
Yeah.
blueprint is critically important. And then when we sit down at the end of whatever the period is, ideally, it's an ongoing thing. But maybe you're giving me a performance review quarterly, or maybe every half year, or God forbid, because it's the worst of all of them, every year, right? And it's the worst of all of them just because it's too long. A year is too long, right? But when we sit
Yeah.
down to give me a performance review, you want to be able to do that in the most objective sense, because that's where I'm going to perceive it to be the most fair. And so to do that, you have to have results. You have to have the competencies. You have to understand the skills, all things that Athena helps draw out. And that's why we created her.
Wow.
So to directly answer your question, we were inspired by trying to help and coach those managers. And we knew that the only way to do that at scale was through the application of technology.
Wow, this is really amazing. I think it's the fact that it's not actually help one employees and everything focus from more like, when most employers are reaching out in terms of scaling and everything, when they are reaching out, they're actually more like task focused. Here is a thing actually more like help to kind of focus on the values. What value are we looking at? What value are we looking at? How do we measure our outcome? How do we measure our results? And those particular ingredients they actually more like put into place in taking those who actually more like fit into the scale of things, being that they know what the full values of what is expected is, and now they're actually more like energized, being that they know the matters and they know what their roles plays out in the bigger scheme of things. And this is really amazing. And I know this is going to change the way people apply for job, definitely. so it's going to change that. So for young trade people starting out, what mistake did you see when actually applying for job or presenting themselves?
Yeah. So I think the same thing that Athena is helping bosses with, managers with, I think applicants have to be thinking about those things too. And so if
Yes, yeah.
go to interview with a company and it becomes obvious that the manager doesn't understand how this role fits into the bigger strategy, the manager doesn't understand the outcomes, they can only talk to you about the tasks, that they don't understand how to measure your success, walk away. It's not a job you want,
Hmm.
because you may take that job. And listen, I told you the story earlier. I'm guilty of this same thing. I took that job that I failed out of. I took it because of the money. I took it because of the location. And I lasted a year and I was miserable. And they were miserable because of me, because they weren't ready for me, right? And so you've got to think really, really carefully about whether the organization has thought through that role. And if they haven't, don't take the job. You're not gonna last.
What has what's what has surprised you the most since stepping into startup world?
Gosh. So when you live in a big company, you say
Yeah.
things like, you say, "Oh, our marketing team is horrible," and then you get in and you have to do the marketing, and you realize, oh my God, marketing's hard, and sales is hard, engineering is hard, and product is hard, and human resources is hard, and finance is hard. It's like all of these jobs are really, really hard. And when you become an entrepreneur, you have to do all of them. And so I used to think that I knew a lot about everything. And what I've come to realize is I know close to nothing about almost everything. And so, I think the biggest piece of advice the biggest thing that I've learned personally, and the piece of advice I would give entrepreneurs, is get over yourself really quickly. Realize that you don't know anything. Open up your mind, be a learner, and shift into learn mode all the time, and just pull in. Ask advice from everybody, because you have to do all of the jobs, because that's what makes it so hard. And you're not going to be able to do them all because you don't know all of them. So you got to reach out. You got to find a network of people that you trust. You've got to ask for advice. You got to be open to learning, and you got to be open that you don't have all the answers.
Wow, amazing. Amazing. Thank you, Scott. And finally, what advice would you give to someone listening who wants to build a team, run a business, and stay productive in a fast changing work environment?
Well, I'm going to give you self-serving advice, right? Get a partner who can help you think through the roles, because you, as a manager, when you're building that team, that burden is on your shoulders. And if you really think through the roles and you really design them well, you're going to build a team of people who want to come to work, who take initiative, who have ownership over what you give them. But it's on your shoulders to really describe that work. And I say it's self-serving because Athena is, I think, the partner that you want. So what I would say is, go and get signed up and let Athena coach you through the design of the roles, because you're going to create a benefit for somebody else by doing that. And the benefit is they are going to come to work ready to embrace the hard challenges, ready to be owners of that work, and they're going to like it. And that's going to be good for the team. It's good for that individual, and it's good for the manager.
Wow, amazing. Thank you so much, Scott. So, Scott, how can my audience connect with you? How can they reach out? How can they learn more about you? And can they learn more about Athena? And where is the best platform to do this?
Yeah, so I am super happy to network with people and to be connected. And LinkedIn is usually the best place for me. You can get me linkedin.com/Scott, SCOTTM. That's on LinkedIn, Scott Morris. And then on the web, you can find Propulsion AI at www.getpropulsion.ai. And I hope people will go and check the platform out and get signed up.
Yeah, amazing, amazing. Thanks for sharing, Scott. I definitely, Scott, thank you for sharing your such a powerful insight. My audience of trade people and hands-on entrepreneurs will really benefit from this, and even others too. And to everyone listening, you can check out Propulsion AI and explore the platform for free. Scott, I really actually appreciate you being here, and it's really a pleasure having you on the Aro Benaiah Show.
I'm really happy to have been here. Thank you so much for the invitation.